So today we're talking about Fate, the Winx Saga. I don't know what this has done to deserve the title of Saga, because it's not attached to anything else in the Winx Club universe, but it sounds nifty. Okay, I get it. Anyways, I never actually watched Winx Club as a kid. I think I was a little bit too old for it, but I say that knowing that I watched Hannah Montana reruns until I moved out for university. So who am I to judge? I did try watching a few episodes on Netflix, but that is apparently where I draw the line. I just can't. But I guess Winx Club was conceptualized by Eugenio Straffi, who felt most cartoons focused on male heroes and he wanted to offer an alternative. Guess he never heard of Totally Spies, but whatever. Specifying the cartoons were dominated by shows for boys like Digimon and Pokemon? Sorry, buddy, I guess you're not for me. So his solution was the Winx Club. He also stated that he had an interest in exploring the psychological side of the transition into adulthood, so he made a show for children. Am I being mean? Probably. I'm happy for all the Winx kids out there. The show is essentially about a group of fairies training at a college where they fight villains, the most regular being 3 witches from a competing school. But the core theme was friendship, so keep that in mind. And now Netflix has emerged with a brand new remake. And when I heard people talking about it, for some reason I thought it was an animated remake, which I had absolutely no interest in, even though people kept asking me about it, but then I clicked on Netflix and saw that it was live action. Then it sadly had my attention. You see, Netflix and the CW combined are like the masters of teenifying things. But up until this point, there's at least been some kind of blueprint. Riverdale kicked it off, then it spread to the chilling adventures of Sabrina, but there were already comic books taking those stories in darker directions. But there is no blueprint for whatever the hell Riverdale turned into. I swear the writers have to be in competition to see who can get the dumbest plot approved. They tried Katie Keene, which was a musical spin-off of Riverdale, and that was officially where people drew the line on the ridiculous scale, and it was canceled. Rip Lucy Hale. I bought this for a joke back when I made my Fantasy Island video a year ago, and then it took 5 months to show up, so this is just where we're gonna introduce it. Okay. If Lucy Hale ever sees this, I swear to God, I'm not a weirdo. Not like that, at least. Sabrina recently got the axe, but have no fear, the Winx Saga is here to fill in your need for magical education. And the first indication that I got that this wasn't still a show for kids is when this dude got murked violently within a minute of the show starting. Literal bloodsplosion. So I was kind of interested, is this gonna be super dark and dripping with horror? But no, it's gonna be about what you expect from a Netflix teen drama with some horror elements. And the instant vibe I got from this was fanfiction. Just blatantly, I'm sure if I looked around, I could find a Winx Club fanfiction that matches this almost perfectly, and I realize I can do that with almost anything out there. But it's got all the staples. Brand new student with a mysterious past who for no apparent reason is more powerful than all the other people around her, but she can't control it and does basically nothing to actually learn how to control it before she does just suddenly unleash her full god potential with no issues. Instantly gets the attention of the resident hottie. Had no idea she had powers before she was plucked from obscurity. And that's fine, a lot of these super popular shows and movies feel like fanfiction. Hell, some of them literally are fanfiction. And it makes sense, if it got popular in the literary sense, it's obviously gonna do well on television too. This just extra feels like one because it's literally reimagined from source material, which essentially makes it licensed fanfiction. And if this gives you any indication of what to expect, Brian Young, a former Vampire Diaries writer, is the creator and showrunner for this Netflix series. But let's try to make this as smooth as possible for both Winx and non-Winx fans alike. So let's get into it and set the stage. As made obvious by this murdered man who wandered through a barrier, this takes place in another world. Another world where this college called Althea is set in Solaria that can seemingly be accessed by stumbling upon these barriers. I'd assume there'd be more protection to prevent people from just wandering in like this, but what do I know? But these are our Winx girls. We have Bloom, a fire fairy, and we know she's a fiery badass because of her red hair, leather jacket, and the literal fire. She's the new kid whose parents apparently weren't fairies and was discovered by headmistress Dowling after she almost burned them alive.
My mom was covered in third-degree burns.
Teenagers. Then there's the water fairy Aisha, who's a strong overachiever, but throughout the season seems to have some issues with her powers popping up after she seemingly had perfect control. It's never addressed or discussed, so I'm assuming they're saving it for the next season. Stella the light fairy, who is the sweet mentor, princess of Solaria, and a bitch. The mind fairy Musa, who can feel the emotional state of everyone around her instead of her original music-based powers. And she's been the cause of quite a bit of controversy around the show because the original Musa is Asian and the actress in the show is not. The show also replaced the Latina character Flora with an earth fairy named Terra, who is white. Though she acknowledges in the first episode that her cousin is Flora, so maybe they're just saving her for the second season for reasons. But it was weird on multiple levels. For one, you're removing diversity that was written into the show for you, which is trash. And Flora was a major fan favorite, so it just seems odd all around. I don't have an issue with Terra as a character. She has a heart of gold, sticks up for herself, but at the same time, why not just have Flora or at least maintain the heritage? Trash. Otherwise, the show completely got rid of Techno, which upset a lot of people too. I guess they just couldn't figure out how to get a technology fairy to fit the narrative or something. And like so many coming of age stories, which I love, this show deals with the concept and question of who am I? Even without magic, everybody goes through stages of self-discovery. That's why these stories are so important, but that doesn't mean that they're without criticism. So it's the first day of school, and this schmarmy bro pops up and acts very familiar with Bloom, even though they've never met, and his name is Sky. And I think he pops up just to help establish that she's just found out she's a fairy, that she was from the human world up until that point, and that if you're not a fairy at Althea, you're a specialist like him. Though this show let boys be fairies and girls be specialists, which in my completely non-expert opinion was a positive change. But it's here she has her first run-in with Stella, who seems rather upset that Sky is talking to the new first year that she has to mentor. It's also revealed that Bloom's parents don't know she's a fairy and think she's studying at some boarding school in Switzerland.
It's only a matter of time before we descend into a Lord of the Flies situation.
Lady of the Flies, sweetie, don't be sexist.
A lot of awkward one-liners like that, but let's continue. So it cuts over to the specialist and we're introduced to the raunchy bad boy Riven. I don't know what he was like in the original, but I'm assuming some teen out there is having an existential crisis at the shit that comes out of this guy's mouth.
It's boss stuff.
So specialists don't have powers, they're just intense warriors who are being trained to fight the burned ones, which is the thing that killed that guy at the beginning of the show. They haven't been around for 16 years, so this one popping up has everyone on edge because they're almost impossible to kill. So it's time for Bloom's dark history. I already spoiled it, but apparently in the typical teen drama of meddling parents and not being understood, she's set her house on fire. Look, I tried to warn everybody in my Freaky Friday video, you don't just take doors away from teens, it's a bad idea. But the scene was also hilarious to me because she's just staring at her notebook that has the very complicated message of powers equal emotions. Look, I understand why that would require some memorization. So after a nice flashback conversation where her mom called her a weird loner after trying to force her out of the house, Mom of the Year award, woo! Bloom thinks it's a good idea to test her uncontrolled fire powers in the woods. Okay, I'm not an expert, but uncontrolled fire and woods don't usually go together, right? But luckily, Aisha's here to put it out.
You shouldn't have been out there. Is that American for sorry I almost set you on fire?
But then points out, hey, you are way too powerful not to have fairy parents. Are you sure you weren't adopted? And Bloom's like, no, I was a miracle. I had a heart defect in the womb that was magically gone the day I was born. And then she finds out about changelings, fairies who were swapped with humans at birth, and that's obviously upsetting.
Why would you even say that?
Modern shows make this stuff so easy. You find out about something dark and mysterious and you just hop on Google to figure it out. Nothing will top Edward Cullen looking up vampire babies. But Stella is down to mess with Bloom, who's feeling a little bit homesick after these revelations, and gives her a ring that will let her travel anywhere in the human world, without warning her of the potential brutal death that could await her. So Bloom spies on her parents for a bit, then goes to the warehouse she would sleep in at night to avoid hurting them, and apparently the sleep space is still there. And she also just left all of her journals here for reasons. But no time to dwell, the burned one found her, she loses Stella's ring, and Miss Dowling manages to save her just in time. Dowling then locks it up in a barn so they can try to figure out if it was just a one-off situation, and then reveals to the specialist trainer Silva that Bloom is in fact a changeling. A changeling that was left in the human world right around the time the last burned one was seen. And then they mentioned someone named Rosalind who used to keep so many things from them, and now we have ourselves a mystery. The first episode also introduces Beatrix, who I'm assuming is one single character to represent represent the Trix trio from the original, and she's an air fairy, which gives her electrokinesis and electrotelekinesis. And she seems to want to insert herself so far up Miss Dowling's ass, and Miss Dowling's not having any of it. But it seems like something based less on admiration and more because she's snooping around for information, and she seems like she's trying to let the burned one go. So with episode 1 out of the way, I now want to just talk about the stuff that I don't want to go through episode by episode. The relationships. So as made obvious, Bloom is into Sky, and Sky seems to be into her, but Stella goes to make some moves to reclaim territory after she had apparently broken up with him the year before, then ignored him all summer. But Sky entertains it, they get back together. Riven is highly confused as to why and assumes she must be really good with her tongue, or...
It's butt stuff.
But that doesn't stop Sky from flirting with Bloom, and the whole thing starts to feel like Mean Girls with Stella being our Regina George. Later we find out that Stella actually has some issues controlling her powers when it comes to strong emotions, and accidentally blinded her best friend because she flirted with Sky. Though to maintain her image, she and her mother would rather everybody think it was on purpose. This becomes a jealous back and forth before Stella ultimately realizes that they're just codependent on each other and lets him go. Aisha is literally the only one with no semblance of a romantic relationship, which is very weird. Considering they never fully address what's going on with her powers, I don't know why they wouldn't have taken some more time for a personal story with her. Muse, who's constantly tortured by the emotions of the people around her, finds peace with a guy named Sam, who she doesn't hear, whose powers allow him to phase through solid objects, and oh no, he just so happens to be Tara's brother. Don't worry, this causes no drama once it's revealed. And Tara likes this character Dane, who is at least bi, but then they don't really do anything with that. Again, maybe they're waiting for the next season to further develop it. He has a crush on Riven, the absolute douche who just can't help but comment on the fact that he can tell that Dane wants his dick.
I know when someone wants my dick.
And maybe it's setting it up that he's into Dane too, but he's still a douche. But Riven likes Beatrix, who seems mostly fine with having him around for these purposes and drugs. And the two of them manipulate Dane into being shitty to Tara and some weird marijuana threesome stuff. I don't know. Let's get back to the mystery. So apparently that ring was the Queen's, and Stella was an absolute dumbass for letting Bloom take it, but still makes them go get it. From a beast that literally requires an entire regiment of child soldiers to be prepared just for the concept that they might come back. But it's fine, because Tara's dad's a professor and says that it's subdued. And Beatrix is being very open about her nefariousness of wanting to break into Dowling's office, openly mentioning that she's looking for secret information that Dowling may be hiding about the school's dark history, and Riven's takeaway is...
So wait, you're like some hot, fucked up history nerd.
So she's gonna take over the world if these are her only barriers? Bloom is trying to figure out her powers before they go to get their ring back from a literal murder monster, and at least Stella also thinks her notes are ridiculous.
You made a list. What's on it? Your favorite ice cream flavors?
Like, if you can't remember that the key to your powers are emotions and that positive emotions are how you should be trying to get them to work without a notebook, you might have bigger problems. But Stella starts rage baiting her because she knows that just like the dark side, anger and fear are the key to the strongest powers. And Aisha obviously has an issue with these training methods, which she only knows about because this notebook now has use anger and fear added to the power methods. It just reminded me of those kids who wanted to pretend that they were like smarter and more productive than other people, so they would just write all of these pointless notes with a color-coded system. But their window to get the ring back is closing because the Queen sent her army to collect the burned one for transport, but oh no, it escaped. Whoever could have foreseen this? And the only survivor is Silva, but he's been marked, which means that if they don't kill the one that attacked him, he'll die from an infection. Keep in mind as we go forward, an entire trained regiment of soldiers couldn't take this one down. So while the gals are trying to figure out how to get him help, Bloom starts to hear things in her head, and it ends up leading her right to the burned one, which she then tries to burn. It's not very effective. So good thing Aisha shows up with her water powers and impales the sucker. So they get the ring back, which was fused into its stomach. They get Silva back to safety, and luckily they have a salve that slows the infection, because apparently impaling the sucker didn't kill it and it got away. Then, just before the episode ends, Bloom goes all seer and has a flashback to her birth, some kind of implanted memory of a woman saying, "When the time comes, find me." Clearly the one that left her in the human world, and probably the Rosalind that Dowling mentioned. And wowee, look, Beatrix isn't the only one trying to infiltrate Dowling's secrets. Her assistant is in on it too. But it's party time, and this whole episode really just shows how self-centered Bloom really is. And I realize she's going through some life-changing stuff, but she could be more considerate to the people around her. For a show that's supposed to be about friendship, they do a pretty bad job. She's constantly neglecting the people around her. She ignores Tara's issues for her own. Aisha, by all accounts, would have a super compelling story story, but she gets pushed into a role of Bloom's assistant and making sure she doesn't get herself and others killed. This is the episode where Aisha starts having some issues with her powers, and instead of going to find her, Bloom just sticks around and talks to Skye. And now she can suddenly control her powers enough to just warm up beer in a Solo cup without causing devastation. She only starts to look for Aisha after Riven tells the story of Stella blinding that girl, but then stumbles on a picture that features the woman that planted that memory in her head standing right next to Dowling. And surprise, I was right. This is Rosalind. But don't worry, Bloom accosts Dowling, who is currently panicked because there's more than one burned one, and we learned that Rosalind was the previous headmistress of the school, commander in the war against the burned ones, and apparently dead. This obviously upsets Bloom, so she tries to recreate the memory by using her powers, and then here's the burned one, so her and Skye rush off to get it. And she honestly has more moments that establish friendship with Skye than she does with any of the girls. But they, being the amazing people that they are, go the second she texts them for help. So a bunch of students managed to knock this thing on its ass in 20 seconds when a series of highly trained adults got wiped out. I get that they needed Dowling to kill it, but still. And if we had any doubt that Beatrix was the baddie, she uses this other dude to trip the trap in Dowling's office, then kills him by literally exploding his body? Because I guess he might spill the beans on what's going, I don't know. And Dowling admits to the other teachers that she lied to Bloom. Not only is Rosalind still alive, but she's currently being held under the school, and that must be who Beatrix is looking for. So they use some magical fingerprint technology and find out that Callum has been muck-ducked by magic. And honestly, how many people could disintegrate someone with their powers? But the Queen is here to host a burned one assembly, but Stella assumes that it's probably just to check on her progress in controlling her powers, because again, she's the princess. This is where Muse's powers become a bit of a lie detector, and they realize that the assembly is also them trying to figure out who killed Callum.
What if they think a fairy killed Callum?
A fairy at that assembly.
They were on edge after, so they clearly didn't find them.
And while the assembly is on, Bloom and Skye are looking for answers about Rosalind and find out that Skye's deceased father was under her command. Then while Skye and Riven are arguing, Beatrix and Bloom break into this war room where Bloom finds out that Rosalind would have been in Asterdale when she was taken from her parents, which, surprise, surprise, is where Beatrix is from. Beatrix, who just zapped Bloom's phone so no one would be able to get in touch with her. So while these two go on an adventure to Asterdale, the others figure out that it was probably Beatrix that killed Callum. So Beatrix shows Bloom the destroyed city of Asterdale and says that it was Dowling that destroyed the whole city of Innocence just to defeat the burned ones, which killed her parents and likely Bloom's as well. And the only reason why she remembers this is because of a memory that Rosalind put inside her mind. Just like with Bloom. Not sure if it's trustworthy. But again, Beatrix murdered Callum, so she's definitely still a baddie. And Bloom really just can't trust anyone at this point because Silva has Skye spying on her. And the show is really amping up that Dowling is hiding something and making her seem sinister, but since there's 2 episodes left, I think this is just a false trail. And to really drive this home, Dowling is torturing Beatrix for info, and even though she's a ridiculously powerful mind fairy, the teenage Beatrix is able to keep her out of her head and toy with her. So with the help of Dane, who for some reason feels like Beatrix was the only one that made him feel like being different was a good thing, even though Tara accepted him from day one and this just seems like it's coming out of nowhere, Bloom gets to talk to Beatrix, who says she'll help her find Rosalind if she busts her out. And before these two can engage in premarital sex, Stella reveals that she's been here the entire time and using her powers to stay invisible, which resulted in Celeria pulling back all their forces from the attack on the burned ones to go find her, which resulted in all these people being killed, so good job, Stella. To be fair, Stella's mom seems like a sociopath who'd rather mentally torture her daughter than see her learn to control them safely. But Skye reveals to Bloom that he's been spying on her, and we get this lovely back and forth that was clearly the result of different bad takes or just bad writing.
You can trust me.
I'm not sure I can trust you.
I saw Jenny Nicholson mention that on Twitter, but it's so much worse in the episode. Like, there had to be at least one take of her just saying, I'm not sure I can. But the gang manages to stop Bloom from busting out Beatrix, so she goes to confront Dowling, who seems shocked that Rosalind said that they were the ones who chose to burn the city. Because apparently Rosalind lied about evacuating the city just to get them to destroy it, and tells Bloom that releasing her would cause devastation. But Bloom's a teenager who needs answers and doesn't give a shit. But the girls give Bloom back the magic key that gets rid of the power dampeners against Aisha's wishes so she can bust out Beatrix, who then takes them to the secret passage where Rosalind is being kept, and then Stella uses her invisible powers to hit Beatrix into the barrier, which immobilizes her, and they head down to talk to Rosalind. Team Aisha all the way here. You guys are dumb. So Rosalind instantly starts mind speaking to Bloom and tells her that if she just completely lets the fire take over, everything will fine and she can get her out. And by the time Dowling shows up to stop it, they've already made it out to the stone circle, which amplifies powers. And they're all calling Aisha Aisha a rat for telling Dowling, but she's literally the only one being truthful in the fact that Bloom is being incredibly selfish considering there's a pack of burned ones pushing their way into the school? Look, just like with multi-level marketing schemes, sometimes you just have to tell your friends they're being dumbasses. But yeah, Rosalind admits that she lied about evacuating the city, but hold on to your head because we're gonna get another whiplash as this story is flipping again. The reason she did it was because Astrodel was a settlement of blood witches. Humans that drew on sacrifice and death to attain magic, which is a big no-no. Which means they probably kidnapped Bloom from her parents because of her intense power, which is also why the burned ones are hunting her down because they know she can kill them. Meaning her parents might still be alive. But back at the school, the burned ones have managed to find their way in and the place seems to be losing power, which makes no sense because the magic powers the school. And because these girls are locked in their dorm for busting out a war criminal, Sam has to use his powers to go figure out what's up, and then the little shadow cat here gets a big cut. And while this is going on, Rosalind is pushing Bloom to unleash her full powers, saying that she handpicked her parents in the human world so she'd experience a loving upbringing. But she's also the only reason the burned ones were able to get through. This is literally just an elaborate test of Bloom's powers. And if the Astrodel stuff wasn't confusing enough, that's also apparently where Sky's dad died. Silva realized there were still people in the city. Andreas was determined to follow orders, so the two dueled and Silva came out on top. Ain't that a son of a bitch? This was a real Obi-Wan to Luke about Vader moment for Sky. So after getting Sam help, the gang catches up with Bloom.
Rosalind wants me to believe that she's the person I need to get through this. She's not.
Aisha has her surrounded in a water tower so she doesn't hurt anyone. And the music in this scene just starts so awkwardly and abruptly. And then she's floating in the air like a literal god with fire wings and starts laying out the burned ones with singular shots, all of them gone in seconds. No actual training went into this, just Rosalind saying, let it go. She's like, fire, Elsa. Even Dowling points out that it's weird.
Spent one night with Rosalind and unlocked ancient fairy magic.
And they're having a little bit of an existential crisis after finding out about the blood witches and realize they were wrong to try to stop Rosalind, but why wouldn't Rosalind have just told them? So Silva's like, oh my god, I killed my best friend for no reason. But it's honesty hour time. Dowling apologizes for not being more honest. Bloom apologizes for being a brat, though I think it's her friends that deserve the biggest apology. She decides to tell her parents the truth and bring the gals for a sleepover. And thankfully they love and accept Bloom and are so happy that she's finally made some friends. But back at Althea, shit hits the fan. Rosalind stages a coup. Queen Luna arrests Silva for the attempted murder of Andreas, because guess who isn't dead? It's Andreas. He's been hiding in the shadows while helping Rosalind and raising Beatrix instead of, you know, his own son. Rosalind reveals that the dragon flame that burns inside Bloom is the magic that both destroys and created the burned ones who used to be humans. Confirms that she staged the whole event to unleash these powers so Bloom would be ready for the upcoming war. And then snaps Dowling's neck to reclaim her role as headmistress. Yo, that was brutal. And the show ends with a 10 out of 10 song as the girls walk back into the new Order of the Fairies. So it's a major cliffhanger, but I also don't really care about it because almost nothing was resolved and suddenly a major war is coming. But I honestly don't see a world where this doesn't get its sequel, even though there are better Netflix shows that had their sequels canceled. But it wasn't terrible, and while I do have issues, I am interested to see where it goes. I also just have a hard time caring about a lot of the characters in general. I have whiplash from the amount of times the story flip-flopped, but also revealed a mystery immediately after establishing it. But I do really enjoy the setting, and I find the burned ones really compelling and wish they had done more with their story. I also really wish the show had taken more time to build out Aisha, but I get that they basically put in place a bunch of different storylines to lead into season 2. But they also barely resolve or build on any of the threads they established. They're just there. The show is about an ensemble cast, but then it has a very one-track narrative, which makes it super hard to feel invested in anything. But I know a lot of people really love this, and I'm sure a lot of people really hate it, so let me know what you guys are thinking down below. What did you like? What did you not like? Is there stuff that was really ridiculous that I just left out of this because there was a lot? But thanks so much for watching. Thank you as always to my Patreon supporters. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.